Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. We're going video digital today, so high tech. I can't promise anything because you guys know this is not my specialty. Normally, we're doing these face-to-face, knee-to-knee, but I'll tell you what, special worth it today because I have a guest all the way from New York. So I couldn't quite get her here in time for the show to start today. So we're doing a live remote version of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and today I am super excited and super blessed to introduce you to a new friend of mine, but someone that I've been paying some attention to, looking at some of the cool things she's doing. I'm calling her a metapreneur, a medical entrepreneur. So for those of you listening, if you're in healthcare, you're gonna love this. If you're a patient, which all of us are, right? You're gonna love this. Also, if you're a potential business person, you want to be inspired, today is the episode for you. So once you hear it, you may want to pass it on, share it along with someone else. And so I want to get going on this. So right now, we're going to call her Dr. E because her name is so cool. It's Dr. Efrat LaMandre, and she is my guest today on the Difference Makers podcast. Dr. E, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And I feel like next time we should do it live and I'll fly out to Colorado.
Well, listen, I know you have a podcast too, so maybe we'll trade. Maybe that I could come out to New York because I've never been to New York very much, and to have a local show me around and show me some of the cool stuff would be amazing. But yeah, we'll do this again, part two, because I have no doubt we are gonna blow this up. And so as we start, tell the audience just a little bit about yourself as a human before we get started, because I've sensed just even in the pre-show time that we've spent together, you've got some really, really special things inside of you that need to be let out. So tell us about those.
Well, that's so kind of you. Thank you. So as a human, which is obviously the most important part before all the business and all the other stuff that we've collected in life, I'm married to an amazing woman. Her name is Gina. And together we raise 3 amazing humans. They all don't need us anymore. We're done raising them, I guess. They're post-college. Well, they think they don't need us, I guess. 3 amazing humans who are impacting the world, which is really nice to see. And this is going to sound crazy, but we have 11 cats, but we're not crazy cat ladies. It's just my wife keeps rescuing them. She can't say no. And so here we are with 11 cats.
I love that. I love that. And how did you get started into healthcare? Because I want to go into your metapreneur background, all the things, the 5 or 6 companies plus consulting, all the things that you do, writing a book. We're going to get to all of that. But there's a story, there's an origin story that gets you to that point, and I am dying to know that.
Okay. So the origin story, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. So the origin story is I started off as a nurse. And at the time I was a single mom raising the kids. This is before I met my wife. And so, you just have to hustle, right? Necessity is mother of invention. And so I did. And that's how I worked. I started in the ER. I started in trauma, and it was great. But then I went back to school for nurse practitioner because that's the next level, because I had that mindset always, just what can we do next? What I didn't know at the time, I was a terrible employee. I never liked to show up on time. I wanted to make my own schedule. I hated asking for days off. And I didn't realize back then that was a sign that I was meant to run my own show. I just thought I was being difficult. So for those of you listening, it might not be that you're terrible. It's just maybe you're meant to run your own show.
That's beautiful. What did you know that you wanted to be in healthcare from the time you were younger, or were your parents kind of guiding you in that direction? What took you to the point where healthcare was the answer and going to nursing school?
No, I have to be honest. I stumbled into nursing school. It just seemed like a great fit for me at the time. A way to put food on the table. That's why I said necessity is mother invention. And then it became a passion. Once I stepped into it, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I started off on a regular floor, what we call med surg, and I moved up to ER and then trauma. And it was a world that was never available to me before, which you only see in the movies. And it just spoke to me. So then when I became a nurse practitioner, my first job was in a community center for patients who were underinsured, underprivileged, didn't have access to care. It was very difficult on the one hand, but it also made anyone who worked there a really good clinician, because you didn't have access to millions of tests and 400 MRIs because the patients couldn't go. So you had to really, get your clinical skills together to figure things out because you didn't have access to a million options. So it was one of the best things I could have done when I got out of school. And then I realized, I could probably do this on my own. I don't know why I think these things. And so I turned to my wife and I was like, what do you think? Should we do this on our own? And she's like, okay, crazy, let's do it.
Now, was she part of because she's also in healthcare, right?
So she's in healthcare. She's a physician assistant, but she is in academia. She practices in the ER. That's how we met. But she is more of academician. She teaches. She's the smart one. She's the educated one.
Nice. Well, it's so interesting. You bring up a story that's really correlative to our own Dr. Ramos here at the firm, where when he was growing up, he wanted to, at first he was going to be a jet pilot. So he gets into the Air Force Academy, which is no small feat. But unfortunately, because of allergies, they wouldn't let him fly front seat jet. Well, just like you saying, I want to do my own schedule, I want to do my own thing, and it leads you to know you want your own show. He's like, I'm not really a back seat kind of guy. I'm more of a front seat guy. So he had the opportunity to leave the Air Force Academy, if you make that declaration within the first year. So he moved on and left, but it was during that time that he decided medicine was where he wanted to go because he's really good at science. And the way he chose ER to get boarded in ER, which is your background as well, was he was getting ready and he had to declare. And he's like, well, do I go, he wanted orthopedics. And he's like, but all that I know about orthopedics is I almost have to do a wallet biopsy to see if I can treat the patient. So what's the one place where I can go where it doesn't matter if you're the president or you're homeless, man, woman, gay, straight, fat, skinny, the ER. Everybody gets served when you walk in that building, when you walk through that door. And that's how he chose ER. So to hear that you guys have those common roots is so amazing to me. And like you say, you learned a lot about clinical skills in the ER. Is that what motivated you to get your PhD in integrative medicine? Because at the end of the day, nurse practitioner is an incredible skill set. We actually, Dr. Ramos and I have a business that we do called FitMD, which is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and things like that. And we have some amazing nurse practitioners, but it's a different level. Now you decide you're going to go get that PhD in integrative medicine. Tell me how those two came together, from the ER and treating guns and gunshot wounds and sickness and all this to that.
That's a great question. I just want to comment on what you just said earlier, though, because you think sometimes people would have a passion and they know what they want to do, and I'm saying this for your listeners as well. And then Dr. Ramos it felt almost like a decision just made almost last minute, and for me, it almost felt the same way. But for those of you who believe, and it's okay if you don't, but for those of you who believe, it really is divine intervention. Because the minute you think you made the decision, but you're there and there's a reason for it. Clearly, this is my belief, and I hope that resonates with some of you.
It does, definitely.
Good. So in order to answer how I got to the PhD, I first have to talk about. So I opened up my own practice. And this is how I know it's guided, because we started in a very small little side apartment. We took over a practice of someone who was retiring, but they had already kind of told their patients, so there was no one. I mean, I saw 5 patients a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why my wife believed in me. Thank God she did, but we saw no one. So I went down to the pediatrician across the street and I said, hey, just so you know, I'm a family practice. I don't want to step on any toes. And he's like, step on toes. I'm leaving in a year and I want you to buy me out.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
This is so guided. So I was like, okay, but I just renovated this place and I'm still in debt up to my eyeballs. And he's like, well, so within a year, we bought the building, bought the practice, and suddenly we're seeing like 20 patients a day, which I thought was so much. And then, we're doing our thing. Again, I renovated and fixed everything. And another pediatrician said to me, hey, I'm retiring and I would like you to buy me out. And I was like, okay. So I brought her practice into our fold. And then suddenly we started seeing 40 a day, which again, I thought was a lot. Fast forward to now, our average is 70 a day.
Amazing.
in primary care, all nurse practitioners only. And we pride ourselves, as you said, making access to everyone. Obviously LGBTQ friendly. We have special prices of people who don't have insurance so that it could be affordable, because there's a group of people in this country who are not eligible for, Medicaid or clinic, but cannot afford high-end concierge. So there is that middle of the world, with hardworking people who need access as well. So we have access for them as well. And then of course, all insurances. And we really pride ourselves also on delivering care with kindness, making sure that even though you're here for an ear infection, we're asking, do you have trouble putting food on the table? Is there any, are you safe at home? So really taking an opportunity in every encounter to make sure that we're managing everything, because sometimes people are coming in for an ear infection and hoping that you'll ask the question about something else.
Yes.
Maybe they're not ready to say it. Are you depressed? So we take an opportunity to really make sure every encounter, however small, is impactful. We try. So I promise I'm getting to the answer of the PhD, but I have to say this part because, so this is all conventional medicine. It's wonderful. It's amazing. If you have a diagnosis, you need to be treated for sure. But there started becoming this world of people who came in and said, I don't feel good, but their labs are fine. So what do you do with these patients? And you just tell them, and I was guilty of this for many years, you're fine. Your labs are fine. Everything's fine. Go home. I'll see you next year. I never realized how disempowering that was, because the labs say you're fine.
Right.
And at the same time, my wife was struggling with a health issue, an autoimmune issue. I'm in medicine. She's in medicine. All our friends are in medicine. We should have the answer. And there was no answer for us. So someone said, you should go to this functional medicine provider. Functional medicine. What is this?
What is that?
What is that word? We never learned it. And he did these, right? Now for those of you listening, it's like, it's something searchable. It's more, but this is like 15 years ago, it really wasn't as common as it is now. So he did these crazy tests on us. We never learned it in school. And he told us this crazy concept that what you eat actually affects your disease process. What?
Who'd have thought?
Yeah. So changed our diet, put us on supplements, and she was cured. Like truly cured, not like improved, like truly cured. So I was like, oh my God, what the heck is going on here? There's a whole world of medicine that no one taught us. And there's no malice. Your doctors are not mean people. We were just not taught it. So I started taking classes. I started bringing it back to my practice. And every time it just kept working. It just kept working. So now all these patients that were not well, but they're not sick. So if you're sick, you want to go to conventional medicine. For sure, I'm not against it. You want the medications, you need what you need. But if you're just not well, there's no room for you in conventional medicine. So I just said, okay, this is obviously working. I have to double down and get the appropriate credentials. And so I did my PhD in integrative medicine. And that's how I created the new method. I'm going to take a pause here because I feel like I've just been talking and rambling, and let you interject.
No, I think here's what I know is coming from you have been like a breath of fresh air, I'm sure, to a lot of people, because you've delineated being sick versus just not feeling well. In the chiropractic world, as we were going through, there's function and there's pain, right? You might have low back pain, neck pain, headache, all the things that chiropractors are famous for helping, but then there's function. And there's how you move and how you eat and the thoughts that you have and the rest that you get and your stress management program. And all of that falls under this thing that you're talking about on how to be well. And so as you've created the new method, I think people need to understand that the wordplay here, KNEW, not NEW. It's not a new method. It's ancient wisdom that you've brought now into the system. So explain to us the new method and how it can help people basically thrive no matter where they're coming from. Because sometimes, like you say, medications are amazing. Other times, medications can be a detriment to our healing and knowing when to use what. That's why I love so beautifully about what you've put together here, Dr. E, is because you have both tools. Like for me, I don't have the tool set that you have to use things outside of manual manipulation, supplements, and all that kind of thing. So you have create this beautiful balance of when to use what nature's given us and when you got to bring that back into balance with a little extra help to get back to what nature can use. So explain that to us, the new method.
Oh, you started explaining it so well. So the new method, you're right, it's KNEW. And it's because you always knew there was a better way. Like you knew there's something my patients will say, like, I knew it. You knew there's a better way. And so there's a few type of patients that come our way. So one is the patient, like I said, who's not feeling well and is either being told, hey, it's your hormones, it's your age, lose some weight, do some exercise, there's nothing wrong with you. And it kind of there's an insinuation that it's in your head, which is why I wrote a book called It's Not in Your Head. We'll get to that in a moment. So it's in your head. So that's one type of patients, like, but I know something's wrong with me, right? And I just can't figure it out. And I love those patients because they have already did all the work. They went to a 50 million specialists, which I'm happy that they did to make sure that they are not sick, that we didn't miss a sickness. And now we have to fine tune their wellness. Then you have patients who already are sick. They're on a few medications, but they were never, I don't know if they were never, advised, but maybe they never considered that there's a different way to manage this. And maybe there's a way where we can come off of some of the medications. And then there's just some people who just want to fine tune, like, I'm all right, but I would like to optimize. So these are kind of the three people that end up at the new method. So what we do is we do a different set of labs, different than your primary care. It includes the primary care stuff because we want to make sure you're not sick. So we're doing the kind of the usual, how are your kidneys? How are your liver? Are you anemic? Because you certainly, if somebody says I'm tired all the time, you want to make sure that there's no disease process going on. But then we're adding stuff that we never do in primary care, like inflammatory markers. A primary care doc is never going to check inflammatory markers because there's no medication for it. So why would he deal with it, right? He or she deal with it. We do some genetic markers. It's be really nice to know if you have a genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's, because guess what? You might be scared, but it just means we need to double down and make sure we never express that gene, right? Because Alzheimer's, I can go into that, as type 3 diabetes. So let's make sure our diet's on point. We certainly do autoimmune markers. So we're looking to see what's cooking that may not quite be diagnosed. For example, I'll give a classic example. People come in and, do I have diabetes, pre-diabetes? Yes or no? But there's this whole world of insulin resistance that you can have for years before you're diabetic. And if we can manage that now and, make sure we never become diabetic. So there's a lot of stuff that we look for, and conventional medicine doesn't look for it because it doesn't have an algorithm around it. There's no medication for it. And there's no time in conventional medicine to sit and counsel people. Oh, let's spend 45 minutes talking about your diet. What ICD-10 code do you use for that? Like, how do you get, it's not happening. I want to make sure that it's clear that there's no physician blaming here. It's industry wide. So first of all, there's no access to this information in school. The system doesn't allow for you to spend the time. And there's also a patient component. Like, does the patient want to make the change? There's plenty of patients who don't, who are happy with a list of 10 medications. So there's a balance. You also need a motivated patient.
And do you find that finding these we'll call it subclinical conditions, is it a matter of special tests? So you mentioned that, like in some of our stuff that we do with our bioidentical hormone replacements, we're looking at some of the same markers that you were just referring to, and people are blown away, doctor. Either like, no one's ever checked this. My doctor didn't check this, which goes to me, in the chiropractic side, my world was always like, I want to check you functionally. I want to see your range of motion. I want to see what your normal muscle tension and tone is, and then we'll go from there. And now that I've entered this other world, it correlates. It's like when you tell me, it's like music to my ears going, yeah, these inflammatory markers, these things, people should get checked, right? They should get checked for these things. Even, I love what you said about the genetics, to say, hey, if you may have a predisposition to something, doggone it, let's find out what it is, because there's probably a way that epigenetically we can hold that off, meaning that by our lifestyle choices, we can, as you say, prevent that gene from getting expressed. How do you educate the listener that we have right now, person watching or listening, on what they should do to make sure that they're staying ahead of the game?
Okay, that's great. So you're asking me, what should they do to stay ahead of the game in terms of testing?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, make sure that you are ready to do the work, because to just have the information and then just sit with it is just going to cause anxiety and fear. So know that the reason we're testing is because this is reversible, but it's in your hands to reverse it, right? So if you're going to find I have inflammatory markers and then you're still going to eat the donuts, why are you doing that? You're just torturing yourself. Okay, so don't test yourself. Don't test yourself for that. It's called the APOE gene for Alzheimer's. If you're not going to make the dietary changes, because now you're just adding anxiety to your life, right? But if you're ready, like, no, I'm going to make the changes necessary, then certainly find out. So the testing. So, and I'm not trying to promote my book. I promise you, it's $9. It's not going to make or break.
Yeah, go ahead and promote your book. I think your book is awesome. So go ahead and promote it. I want the people to hear about it.
Okay, so the book is called "It's Not in Your Head," and it just launched on Tuesday. And in there, I give you the list of tests that you should ask for, like just all there. I also, what I write there, and I don't mind sharing this at all, because in the book it says, when you're done and you feel great, please give this book to someone else. So the idea is to empower people so that they can make these changes on their own. So let me tell you what I mean. There's like a million tests, right? There's mold testing, and there's hormone testing, and there's stool testing, there's food testing. Where do I start? And if you listen to the guy at the gym, it's like, oh, it's definitely mold, or it's definitely Lyme. So in the book, I just bring it down, like, don't do any of that first. Don't do any of those tests. Go to your primary first. Make sure you're not sick. That's always, always, always. Don't self-diagnose. Then you can ask for these additional tests if you want to, but the main driver behind all disease is inflammation. So let's bring down inflammation, whether or not you have those test results. Let's bring down inflammation. Change your diet, low carb diet, intermittent fasting, all right? Exercising. I don't mean you have to join a gym. You don't have to go CrossFit. No disrespect to CrossFit. Just start walking. Like, there's things that you can do for free. Intermittent fasting is free. It's just, you have a watch. You just figure out your timing, right? Low carb diet, of course, is not free, but it is definitely cheaper to make your own food than it is to eat out every day. I 100%, ordering lunch every day adds up, but, making yourself a salad is definitely cheaper. So there's things you could do without spending any money. And movement. So you start there, and then you start working on sleep. You need to sleep 7 hours as well. And by the way, on my website, I give full talks about all these things completely for free. Feel free to go on it.
And share your website. We want to make sure people get to your website.
It's thenewmethod.com, and it's new with a K. So my staff calls it canoe method, but it's thenewmethod.com. And the blog is there, and I talk about each one of these topics. And so you could start there. Then this is what I say. If you feel great, stop. Don't test anymore. You're good. Who cares if there's mold, or like, who cares? You're fine, because you're probably going to find something if you test.
Yes.
But if you implement those changes and you're still not well, that's when you need to say, okay, I need some specialized testing, and maybe need to find a functional medicine provider in your area that could order some testing. But the idea is to clear the weeds before we start doing all these testings. Let's just start implementing the changes right now, and then see where that takes you. Does that make sense?
Completely. And I love what you were saying. This is going to take me down. I got to be careful not to get down 17 rabbit holes with you.
I know, it never ends. It's a vortex.
It's beautiful. So if we look at this, for those people listening, if you said, okay, if you could do one thing as a human being to try to clean your health up, it's to decrease inflammation. The way you do that, in great part, is through your diet. Just eat things that aren't pro-inflammatory. If you don't know what those are, look up pro-inflammatory foods on Google. It'll give you 1,000 of them. But basically, the more junk you eat, the more inflamed you are. The more healthy you eat, the less inflamed you are. Drink lots of good water. So that being said, I gotta bring something up that as I was looking through one of your podcast/blog episodes that I'm a huge fan of, because I started studying under a guy named Andrew Huberman. And if you've not heard of Andrew Huberman, man, Doctor, I recommend. He's a Stanford neurobiologist and neuroscientist and ophthalmology professor at Stanford. And he does a podcast every single week called the Huberman Lab. And I have learned some amazing things. And one of the big things he studies is light, especially as it relates to sleep. And I know that you have 2 episodes on your podcast, one on light and one on sleep. And that just perked my interest, because now I'm all the student, right? So I get up every day and I'm outside for about 30 to 40 minutes walking my dogs, not for training. I have a different training schedule, but just to get the light in my eyes so that it hits those photoreceptors and it starts to put me into that sleep, make sure my dopamine's right, doing melatonin stamp down, like all that stuff to sleep. So can you explain, so we've talked about reducing inflammation, critical for baseline health. Tell us just a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about the sleep light connection.
Okay, sure. And sleep, by the way, for those of you scared of Alzheimer's, everyone's scared of Alzheimer's. Sleep. There are studies out there that say that lack of sleep is causative, not just correlative.
Wow.
So yeah, there are studies.
How much sleep is considered a deficit, Dr. E? Or is it over time? Or you mentioned 7 hours? Yeah.
It's over time. You want to get 7 to 8 hours, but it's definitely over time because we feel that we're doing well, but actually we're just accustomed to being suboptimal. We're actually not doing well. So the sleep light connection, huge connection, and we lose it, and we lost a lot of it also in COVID because when we were inside, like during the pandemic, being inside was a problem. For a lot of people suffered more from insomnia, and that's because of lack of access to light. So here's how it works. You have this hormone called cortisol, does a million things in your body, but one of the things it does is it wakes you up in the morning. Its job is to be very high in the morning, and then throughout the day it goes less and less and less, and then melatonin takes over. Melatonin, on the other hand, believe it or not, starts in the morning as well, and it's supposed to start like kind of dripping throughout the day and then getting higher at night, but it starts in the morning, and this entire process is activated by light. So if you ever notice that when you're sleeping, you'll feel the light coming through the curtains, even though you're sleeping, because you're designed that way. You're designed to be able, your brain knows that it's light out, even if your eyes are closed. So it's looking for that. It knows, oh, okay, it's morning. Release the cortisol, high levels of cortisol. And then throughout the day, as the sun goes down, it's supposed to go less and less. And that's melatonin's trigger to be like, oh, it's dark, time to go to sleep. But we messed it all up. We're never outside. At night, we have these full blasting lights on, right? So we're never outside in the morning. We don't see the sun. So we're like, is the brain is like, is it morning? Is it night? And then at night, we have the TV going, the blue light going. So then the brain's like, wait, should I release cortisol? It's like, what's happening? And then like, why do I have insomnia? Because your hormones are out of whack and your neurotransmitters are out of whack. So light is a key factor for your brain. It's a lizard brain. It doesn't know to look at the watch. It needs the natural cues to know if it's day or night. And then so many things, come from that. So your energy levels are higher when the cortisol is released. Energy levels are lower when melatonin is released. So your entire day is set by seeing the light.
That is brilliant. So now, where this is going, and I promise we're going to get to the business side because I want people to hear your entrepreneurial spirit here.
Stay here all day.
But this is so fascinating because if we're giving like fundamental building blocks of what people can do to be healthy, now we know we're cutting inflammation through the things we can control. We're getting good rest and getting good light. Those go together. What position does good hydration play in overall health, and what does that look like?
That's a great question. I just want to say, so with nutrition, if you don't know what to eat, pretend you're on a farm. If you were on a farm, if you could grow it or raise it, you should probably eat it. And if you were on a farm, you probably wouldn't see anything in a box. So just think of it like that. That's your criteria. If you pick up a box of mac and cheese, like, does this grow on a farm? No, it doesn't. Don't eat it. Okay.
I love that. We always told our patients, shop around the perimeter of the store, yes, and you're better off than going up and down the aisles for that same kind of reason.
Exactly right. And then intermittent fasting, I do want to say, somewhere between 14 to 16 hours-ish. I just want to say, if you're diabetic, you just need the consultation of a doc. But if you're not, something to consider. And then, as you said, the sleep, the movement, and hydration and water. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. It's everything. And I try to appeal to everyone's vanity. If you want your skin to look good, please drink a lot of water, because that seems to be the thing that triggers people like, oh, my skin will look better, I'll do it. But it's a filtration system. You need water for the filters to work. If just as simple as that, as plumbing, right? Your kidneys is plumbing, and then there's a filter in there, and you want to make sure you're allowing the body to constantly filter out what it needs to. So hydrating, making sure that you have the water, making sure that you're able to expel what you don't need, both ways, because without water, you're also going to be constipated. So I don't mean just urine. Sorry if that's a little gross, but we need to get the junk out, and water is a big part of that.
And do you recommend about half your body weight in ounces, or how would people, as a general rule, say how much water should I drink? Because 64 ounces isn't enough for most people, right? The eight ounce glass of 8 glasses of 8 ounces a day or whatever. How do you talk with your peer?
I would say about, as you suggested, that the half your body weight in ounces is good. But you know, with this one, it's relative, because I have some people who don't drink at all. So if I can get 2 glasses in, I win.
Ah, yes.
Yes, it all depends. Like, same thing with nutrition. If I'm getting someone to just not go to McDonald's or choose something without, so it depends. I really try to make it a little bit more like, how much can we get? Because sometimes if you make the goal too big, you're like, well, I'm never getting that much, so I'm just going to drink coffee all day. So just drink more.
I love it. Drink a little more. So, okay, so I got to go back to intermittent fasting. I intermittent fast. My window is 10:30 to 7:30. So that's kind of my restricted feeding. A lot of people are not sure why. And of course, then when you have, it depends what you're all about, right? If you're into really wanting to do weight loss and you're focused on that, then, well, should I be doing 6 tiny meals a day? So there's so many concepts. But we're talking longevity and overall health here. That's the conversation you and I are focused on, versus getting like, if I wanted to put on another 20 pounds of muscle, intermittent fasting is not the way for me to go, right? I'd have to have more calories, this, that. But again, for the constructs of our conversation of longevity, wellness, and overall health, I love the idea, but I want to hear from your perspective for our people. Why intermittent fasting? What does it mean? And what does it do for us? Because I'm a huge fan.
Oh my God. I love intermittent fasting. And by the way, you could still bulk up if you want to, because then when you eat, you could just, so the idea that you can't build muscle on intermittent fasting, I'm going to challenge that, because if you met my trainer, you'll see.
I need to meet your trainer and follow their guideline.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just start with something called, let me just say this. I can't speak highly enough about it. I try not to get too excited about it, but it just, if you're talking about Alzheimer's prevention, if you're talking about sugar regulation, if you're talking about anti-inflammatory, intermittent fasting is where it's at. First, on the macro, I just want you to imagine that if you had to work 24 hours a day. So if you're eating all the time, your body's working all the time. Okay, you don't want to work more than an 8-hour shift. So why are you asking your body to work more than an 8-hour shift? That's just on the macro, like basic kind of 5th grade level. Give your body an opportunity to not have to process something all the time, right? Because if I'm processing food, that's glucose elevation. I have to worry about excretion. There's a lot that's happening every time I eat. But there's this thing called metabolic flexibility, which basically means right now, if you skip a meal, for most people, they get hangry, they get shaky. Oh my God, I have to eat. That's an inefficient machine. That's like having to fill your car up every block. You would never buy a car like that. For every block, the car's like, oh my God, I need some more fuel. You'd never get it, right? So an efficient machine would be like, well, if I get a meal, great. But if I don't get a meal, I'm not completely devastated. And the way that happens is the universe or God, however, whatever you want to believe in, created this really cool thing in our body. It's called gluconeogenesis, which is the liver can turn to the fat stores and turn it into glucose. Glucose is our fuel. And so that's why we could fast for a really long time. As long as we drink water, you can survive without eating. But the only time that gluconeogenesis is turned on is when you fast. So if you're eating 6 meals or every 2 hours, you're never going to turn on gluconeogenesis. You're always going to feel like you have to eat. That's why my people is like, you don't understand. If I don't eat, I shake. Yeah, of course. Because you've gotten your body used to exogenous glucose from an outside source of glucose. But you have this internal ability to create your own glucose. The flexibility is sometimes you eat, sometimes you skip a meal, and both times you feel like this. So you want metabolic flexibility. You want the body to be able to toggle on and off between, having to eat versus having to make your own glucose. And that's the goal. So that, and that only happens. So you may not be, when I first started, I thought I was healthy. First thing in the morning, I got up and had my oatmeal and almond butter, like at 6 a.m. I thought that was the most important thing in the world. And when I had to take that away, I was like, what are you doing? I couldn't even work out for like a month in the morning because I was like so shaky. It didn't even occur to me like I was addicted to this oatmeal and almond. Like, that's not okay that you have to eat as soon as you open your eyes. So it's okay if it takes you time. It took me a good month to get to 16 hours. Now I do more, but take your time. Don't push yourself. Don't faint, right? Don't do anything harmful. Get there slowly. Do a half hour at a time, 12 hours and 12 and a half, 13. It's all about getting there slowly, calmly, peacefully, without hurting yourself. But then now that time that you're fasting, that's where the magic happens. That's anti-inflammatory. If you're going into ketosis, that's amazing for your brain. It's just never ending. I'm going to shut up now.
Nice. Ooh, you got me excited. I'm sorry that my feeding window started. I want to extend it now. I had my protein drink at 10:30 and now I wish I would have waited till noon. So that is beautiful. I want to come back to one thing about rest too. If someone has trouble sleeping, obviously sleeping and getting up at night, whether you have to go to the restroom or whether you wake up and then you start thinking about something, is the 7 hours a day a cumulative thing, Dr. E, where if someone could then either do a non-sleep deep rest function or a meditation or a nap, does all that count towards the 7 hours in a day period, or does it have to be like up to 7 consecutive hours to really get that brain health, body health, energy, that kind of stuff?
Excellent question. The studies show that you need to get to 7 hours consecutively. It's okay if you're also napping, but if the napping is interrupting, there is something in your brain called a glymphatic system. It's different than the lymphatic system. It starts with a G, glymphatic system. It's basically drainage for your brain. Like, kind of think of all the gunk coming out, and it only gets activated in deep sleep. As another thing that happens in deep sleep is growth hormone. Growth hormone, as you can imagine, when we're children, we release it all the time. That's why we grow. But then as adults, we only release it. Well, we release it mainly, I shouldn't say only, in deep sleep. And growth hormone is restorative. We need it in our adulthood to help repair. So there are certain things that happen in deep sleep, which doesn't happen in interrupted sleep or 3 hours here, 3 hours there, that really help rejuvenate the brain and the body. So the 7 hours consecutively. Now, if you get up to the bathroom, there's nothing you could do, but I wouldn't make it a lifestyle choice. I wouldn't say, well, as long as I get 7 hours and somewhere in 24 hours, if you have the ability to get it all in, certainly get it all in. I know it's sometimes unrealistic for people who have night shifts and things like that. And I don't want anyone to feel bad about themselves or what they have to do. This is just an ideal scenario. Most importantly is that you don't have any negative self-talk to yourself, please. These are just, ideal scenarios.
Guidelines.
Guidelines, yes.
I love that.
I do want to, I'm sorry, for those of you who have trouble sleeping, I really want you to take a look at your last meal. If your last meal is heavy, high carb, or has alcohol in it, you are not going to sleep well. You want to have a very light meal, minimal carbs, no alcohol for your last meal, and have at least 3 hours between your last meal and when you fall asleep. You will notice that you sleep so much better.
Do you like berberine with the last meal? I know that's something that Andrew Sinclair, the kind of longevity specialist, he's big on that. I started taking berberine with my last meal because it will drive blood sugar out, kind of acting like metformin mimicking literally metformin in a way to pull blood sugar out. Is that anything that you're about, or are you just trying to keep it really straight, simple, eat really clean that last meal of the day and try to make it 3 hours before bed?
I haven't heard of it, but I love supplements. I just like supplements as part of this complete breakfast. I get nervous when people use supplements like, oh, I'll just have the thing and then still smoke my cigarette, right? So I like it as part of a whole. But certainly, why not have berberine with your meal? I cannot see a downside for it.
Yeah, awesome. So look we're already at 40 minutes and I got to get to the other side of the story because this is, me and you have a natural kinship. I feel it so much. But so for those people listening, I hope you've gotten the fundamentals of how to start a healthy program between what you eat, the rest you get, the water that you drink, and we didn't even go deep into stress management program, but what Dr. E said that was so important is that non-negative self-talk. Know that you're on a journey, do it piece by piece, little by little. So all that being said, I want to switch gears. Now the inspiration on the other side of your life. You've started 5 that I can count, maybe more, 5 companies besides your consulting business. And it ranges from the new method that we talked about, also helping with everything from kids to geriatric patients, going in, doing telemedicine, and having virtual scribes to help physician or nurse practitioners get their work done and focus on patients. What's behind the business mind of Dr. E, and how you scale something up and how you take something and make it from where you were in this tiny little place seeing 5 people a week to now 70 people, a day going into all these clinics and at multiple sites and everything else you're doing? Tell me about the business side of things.
So I'm going to make this short so that your listeners don't get too bored of us. But the idea is I see a problem and then I'm like, we got to fix this. And then I create a business around it. So, EG Healthcare was the one thing that I was just like, wow, we could do this. And then the new method came along because I saw all these patients who needed more. In the interim, as the business grew, I realized that having a scribe in the office is so instrumental, especially in conventional medicine, because there's speed and volume involved. And if you're busy typing, you really can't connect with your patient. So I used to have a live scribe in the room with me. And that was great, in which the scribe is thriving and you can really just, do this with your patients. And that eye contact is so important. It's everything. And also hugs. I give out a lot of hugs, but it's really important. So the scribe, yes, it helps efficiency. It helps the provider, docs, NP spend less time charting, but it also enhances the patient experience exponentially. So I hired a virtual scribe company, and I got to know they're located in India, and I got to know these women. And over time, they're like, yeah, we don't really like the way we're being treated, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is outrageous. I can't have you working for me if you're not being treated well. Let's just open up our own company. As a joke. I didn't think. And then they came back to me a few weeks later and said, we're ready. And I was like, what? I went home to my wife. I'm like, babe, tell me not to open up a scribe company in India. She's like, you have to help these women. You have to open up a scribe company in India. So we opened up a scribe company in India, so now we're helping the providers here in the States and the patients make sure their experience is wonderful. But now we're empowering women across the globe, by the way, who can work from home because it's nighttime. So they cannot work in companies that require them to leave the home for cultural reasons. So they're working safely from home. Their families are comfortable because they're home. They're able to help put food on the table, and they're treated and paid fairly. And it's been a godsend. I've actually mentioned them in my book and my acknowledgments. It's been, to be able to think that I'm affecting someone across the globe has been amazing.
That's powerful.
And then just in general, I'll just wrap up that what I discovered when I first started EG Healthcare, I thought it was just about the patients. But what I discovered is that it's about the team. And once the business started taking off, having a platform to help people with, hey, I need a microloan. Hey, can you help me go to school? Hey, can I bring my kid to work because daycare closed for some reason? Yes, the answer is yes, because now we could do that. And we're able to impact people's lives in a way that I never, it blindsided me in a good way. I never thought that that's what it could become. So being able to use your platform, use your resources to help all the people that work with you and make your dream come true has just been a journey in itself.
You've created a tide that lifts all boats. And that's what I just heard you say. We are really big on culture around here. We have a culture officer that all he does is make sure that we're trying to take care of people, our people, because we know if we take care of our people and live our core values from within, it's going to exude out to our clients, our patients, everything like that, right? But I'm interested in your side because you are such a visionary, you're such a passion player, you have all these things going. There's more to a business besides the idea and the passion and the drive. Those get it off the ground, but it's processes and it's systems that drive it. Are you that person too? How did you, especially with so many companies, do you have someone that puts the processes in place, or does the team create the process as you go and you refine it? How can someone that's listening with a vision and a passion, if they don't necessarily understand processes, or maybe they don't even know they need processes, where do those come into and systems come into the place of your success?
That's a great question, because you're right. A lot of people have the vision and the passion, but it's really about the process. Like, you must have processes in place if you're going to scale. Listen, if you're a one-man show, like if you're a therapist, it's going to be one-on-one, and that's great. You probably don't need processes. But if you plan to get a little bigger, it's about processes, or else everything fails. So even like I said to you earlier, the fact that every patient every time gets screened for depression, that's a process. No one remembers to do that. It's like, this is the thing, you must do this thing, and then as you get trained. So processes are super important. If I naturally see things in processes, but if you're not, don't get discouraged. You need to get, like, I'm going to say COO, but that doesn't really make sense if you're just starting. You need to get it's called an integrator. There's this book called Rocket Fuel. There's the visionary and there's the integrator. You need to get someone. I have an integrator. Even though I see the flows, I no longer have the time to implement the flows. So she implements the flows. She's my right hand. But you need to get an integrator. You need to recognize you need an integrator. If you think that passion alone is going to make this happen, it is not. It's the processes that make it happen.
So now let's move into another side. You're inspiring nurse practitioners that come out. You're helping them grow so that whether they're coming out of school before their first real clinical gig, right? I mean, and they've treated patients, but it's still a different world, quote unquote, out there than in the auspice of school. Or if someone like, one of our MAs that we brought into one of our clinics, she hadn't been in the industry for a dozen years because she was raising a family. And I know that one of the things that you're really passionate about is helping that bridge, either someone entering the real workforce or coming back into it as a nurse practitioner. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration to do that, to help these folks make that transition.
I love that. So our company's called EG Prep, and it prepares you when you finish school. So doctors have a residency program, which is robust. So they spend a lot of time kind of learning clinically. And NPs have spent a lot. In order to become an NP, you have to be a nurse first. So you spend a lot of clinical time being a nurse. But there is a bit of a transition from school to clinical as an NP. It's a different mindset. So I want to make sure I'm very clear. NPs, when they graduate, are very, very competent and do not need any additional help. So I don't want anyone to say that and misinterpret what I say. But we did create EG Prep as an additional support for those who feel they need it. So it's a weekend where we just kind of help do a little bit of bridging between academics and clinical. And for now, it's for NPs, but it's really open for everyone, because I think everyone, if you're really honest, is terrified when you leave school and then you go see patients. So it's to help bridge that terror.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then, like you said, sometimes you become an NP and then you decide to stay home or, raise the kids, or maybe you went into a specialty. Now you want to come back to primary care and you're like, I need to get a little bit hands-on. So those NPs would come to EG Prep as well. I'm glad that you mentioned MAs though, because I don't know how it is in Colorado, but because EG Prep is about to expand to MAs as well, because we discovered that a lot of these young kids are coming out of high school, they're going to school for medical assistant, spending a lot of money and coming out with no skills. And it's devastating. And they're in debt and they don't know how to draw blood. They don't know how to do blood pressure cuffs. These schools, I'm not quite sure what they teach them, not naming any names. And so we decided to create programs where you learn the skills. Because what good is that certificate if you don't have the skills? Because in New York State, for example, you don't need the certificate to work. So being have the skills, you can get a job. If you want to get the certificate later, once you're making money, great. But these kids are coming out in debt and don't have the skill set, and have a hard time getting a job, and that I can't abide by that.
Oh, I love another passion project. Here we go. I love it. Hey, would you, Dr. E, explain to the listener who might not have the background in understanding types of providers, the difference between a medical doctor and a nurse practitioner and a physician assistant? Those are the three that I seem to hear the most people have confusion about. And so I have the opportunity to work with medical doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. And so it's all beautiful, especially when they're combined in a really synergistic, wonderful way. But would you just explain that to our audience on what those three distinct professions are?
Absolutely. And just so you know, for your listeners, there's some groups that can't stand the other. And there's just like a lot of politics around it. So I'm just going to speak straight about the education, and then you guys can make your own decisions. By the way, NPs rock. Okay. So, okay. No editorial. Okay. So doctors, they go to med school, and after med school, they go to residency, which basically means they spend at least 3 years in the hospital setting, continuing to learn while seeing patients. They're called interns when you're in the hospital, or residents when they're in the hospital, and then they graduate and they become attending, and that's when they can open up their own practice, etc. They can do additional schooling and specialize, in orthopedics or whatever. So that's their trajectory. They have the most time in school. So that's just a fact. No one can argue that. They have the most time in school. Physician assistants, my wife's a physician assistant. They're also, it's a graduate degree. So after college, they go and they do med school, everything that's in med school, just no residency. So they do rotations while in med school, but there are some programs that actually sit in class with the med students. So it's schooling wise, it's the same. They just don't have residency. And it's just the curriculum is usually year round. And so it's like an intense med school without the residency. Nurse practitioners, you first have to be a nurse, and you have to be a nurse for, each school has a minimum requirements, but you have to be a nurse for a bit of time, and then you go back to school to become an NP. So you have your clinical time before going to school, because you can't go from nurse to NP directly. You have to spend some time on the field, and then you go back to school, and then you do your master's degree, or some people do a DNP, like a doctorate, and then you graduate, and then you are able to diagnose and treat. Now, what they can do depends on the state. So in New York State, I can practice autonomously after 3,600 hours of experience. I can practice autonomously. I can own EG Healthcare. I do not need a doctor to sign anything. But if I go across the bridge to New Jersey, I need a doctor to sign something. So what they could do is state to state. If I went to Georgia, I wouldn't even be able to order an X-ray. So that is state driven. We're trying to work on that. And I think.
And physician's assistants also require the supervision of a medical provider, right? Some nurse practitioners, based on states, do not need that direct supervision if they meet all the requirements like you talked about. But is it true that every PA, physician assistant, they are under the auspice of a medical doctor?
I think that there's 1 or 2 states that have given PAs autonomy as well. Don't quote me on that. I should get better acquainted with that, so that my wife doesn't say, "Really, you don't know this?" I will find out before our next time we meet.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's great. So this has been a wonderful episode. I have a final couple of questions for you. One is the obvious. Do you only see patients in New York based on license? Because now with telemedicine and all that kind of stuff, if someone listening were to want to ask you a question, can you visit with them if they're outside of the state of New York, or and if not, how do they go about finding a good provider to help them in this integrative method that you've been talking about?
Oh, great question. So we do see patients nationally, and the way we've structured it is, you're right. In New York and New Jersey, I can get more involved because I can practice medicine here. But what we've designed is a coaching program with my team that is, every single person is trained by me, and then they can provide coaching. So what they can't do, right, they won't be able to prescribe medication. We can't order labs. We can send you a list of labs that we would really like to see, but we can't order labs in your state. But we work with people all over the country using a coaching model.
Okay. And so if someone was interested in learning more about your style of healthcare or have questions for you and your team, how would they reach you?
Okay, so you go on thenewmethod.com, or find us on Instagram at The New Method. Send us a message, or online you can actually book a consult. I think the consult's like $47. And then if you decide to work with us, that $47, we take that off of whatever the cost is. And you can talk to my team, they'll explain what we do, and then you can make a decision if you want to continue with us. And we really love working with our patients. We enjoy it a lot. So I hope that you all reach out if you are struggling and you need help.
That's awesome. Okay, final question. And you are actually, I've asked this question, a final question, over 100 times, right? This is like episode 115 or 118 or something, whenever this one comes out and people listen to it, whatever the number will be. I'm changing it for you. This is the first time I've asked this question. Here's my normal question. So you're going to have the opportunity to answer 2 questions if you like. But my normal question is, what's the biggest piece of advice that either you've ever been given or you've learned along the way that has made you who you are or become a seminal piece of your life? That's my original question. Now the question I'm going to ask you is, and again, feel free to answer both if you want, but if you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would it be and why? You could share a meal with it. It doesn't have to be dinner because we don't want to get into your intermittent fasting time, but whatever that time is, if you could have one conversation with someone living or dead, who would it be and why?
Okay, you're not going to think my answer is real, but it would be my wife and kids.
Really?
Yeah. Because I do all of this at the end of the day for them. Like they're my center. So having a meal, because just sitting with them and just an uninterrupted meal with my wife and kids is exactly what I would do.
That is great. Okay, so now correlative to that, are any of your kids in the businesses that you've created? Did any of them follow into the healthcare stuff, or did they all go on their own paths?
So my child number 2, Ariel, is a nurse in the ER right now. But they have all helped at every time, whether it's picking up boxes, helping us shred. I mean, they all kind of grew up in the practice of helping us, oh, we got a new one. Let's help, let's move. So they've all been part of it. And yeah.
Okay, good. Well,
in answer to your first question.
Yes.
The piece of advice, which took me a long time to embody, because I always thought it was weak, but it turned out it's the strongest, is to lead with kindness. It took me a long time to realize it takes more strength to lead with kindness than any other type of leadership.
Were you not a kind leader at one point?
I think I was very, very, because I was so driven. It was all about like, let's go. What are we doing? It's more rah, kind of, all or nothing mentality, which is effective, but I don't know that it doesn't have, and then you could also be kind in it, but kindness wasn't the top priority. It was a get it done first. And it turns out when kindness is the first priority, everything gets done.
Ooh, wow, that just went over me like warm syrup. Like that's how that went over me right there. Like the way that you said it, I love that so much. I'm going to try to be kinder today with my team just because of this. So, Dr. E, this has been such a pleasure and just such a great time. I know we could talk on any one of these topics that we hit today. We could drill down for hours at a time on that, but I want to invite you back already and do another one of these to talk about something. But you have been so gracious in your time. I know how busy you are. And, we here at Ramos Law just wish you nothing but the best. And thank you so much for sharing yourself and your message with us and others. And I hope that people listening to this, that they will take this advice, that you listening or watching will apply it, and that you'll share it with someone else. Because this is the kind of stuff that makes a difference in your life today and pays dividends for decades down the line for you and your family. So, Dr. E, thank you. I can't thank you enough. What a great part of my day.
Thank you. I have to say, I've been on a lot of podcasts. You exude such an energy, and it was really a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.